Breaking news in the former president's fight to keep documents from his administration out of the hands of the House Select Committee investigating him. Just a day before the committee meets, perhaps to take action against one of his former cronies, Steve Bannon, for defying a subpoena. CNN senior legal affairs correspondent Paula Reed joins us now with the latest. So talk about this lawsuit. What is going on?
So here, Anderson, Trump is asking the court for, at most, granting his request to block lawmakers from actually obtaining these materials. And at the very least, he is asking them to delay lawmakers from obtaining these materials, arguing that these requests are so broad, his lawyers need more time to review them. Now, to support these requests, he argues that there's no legislative purpose to these requests. He's saying, look, this has nothing to do with passing a law. His lawyer repeatedly cites a Supreme Court case related to a request for his personal financial records when he was the sitting president. But that case does not deal with a former president. And we know that historically the Supreme Court has really granted broad deference to Congress when it is conducting investigations. Now, Trump's lawyers also argue that he is entitled to executive privilege, but he believes that he is not sufficiently protected under the current law.
Is there consensus in the legal community about the merits of what he's arguing?
Look, Anderson, it appears to be a long shot. Based on the experts I've spoken with, they've said, yeah, the court might decide to revisit this issue of executive privilege. The former president certainly has a right to try to assert executive privilege, but it is not equal to that of a sitting president. But I'm told it's unlikely that the court is going to take up these arguments that these requests are too broad, or that lawmakers here investigating January 6th lack a true legislative purpose. I mean, one asked me what could be more important than investigating an insurrection.
The Select Committee isn't scheduled to meet tomorrow to vote on whether Steve Bannon should be referred to the Justice Department for criminal contempt. What do you know about that?
Really interesting, Anderson. CNN has obtained a letter from the White House counsel that reveals that the Biden White House counsel has determined that Steve Bannon has no claim to executive privilege. Now, in reporting on this and speaking to experts, I was told there was a chance that perhaps there would be a carve-out for some conversations that Bannon may have had with Trump. But here the White House counsel says no. President Biden has determined that based on what the committee is investigating in the interest of the United States, he has no claim to privilege here and that he must comply with this subpoena. Now, Bannon has previously told the committee he's not going to comply unless ordered by a court. Now, the committee has rejected that argument, and tomorrow night they are scheduled to move ahead with a vote to refer him for criminal contempt.
All right, Paul Reed, appreciate it. Thank you. More on this now from the White House. CNN's Caitlin Collins is there for us tonight. So what's the reaction of the White House tonight about this lawsuit?
They're standing by their decision to say that they are not going to waive or they're not going to assert privilege over these documents because they say that President Biden himself has made the decision here and he doesn't think that this is a situation that justifies using it. And so they're not commenting on the lawsuit specifically, Anderson, but they are saying that they believe the former president abused the office of the presidency and therefore, given this was what they say was a clear attempt to subvert the election, it doesn't justify waiving that executive privilege that typically a current president would do for a former president when it's documents shortly after they've left office. And so these are documents we know that the White House counsel has seen. Not many people in the White House has actually seen these documents that the former president is trying to keep out of the hands of the committee. And Anderson, we should remind people, we don't actually know what's in them yet. We know it's related to what was happening inside the White House on January 6th. We know the former president has reviewed them. And we know, of course, that the National Archives has told them that if there is no court order, they are set to be released to Congress on November 12th, which, of course, is a date that is fast approaching. But the White House is standing by their decision here. So, yes, this is going to be a fight between the former White House and this current White House and, of course, the National Archives and the January 6th committee over these documents.
Do you expect President Biden to comment on the lawsuit?
It's hard to say because what we've seen so far is this pattern of where the White House says, we're not going to comment on that. That's a decision that's being made by the White House counsel's office and the Justice Department and whatnot over these documents, of course, and what's going to happen to Steve Bannon tomorrow with the criminal contempt charge that is likely coming his way. And the White House, though, has said that, but then President Biden has often been really candid about this. He was on Friday night when I asked if he thought the Justice Department should prosecute those who defy these subpoenas. In the past, he has spoken pretty openly about it, but we haven't heard him per se exactly on his decision not to waive the privilege, though the White House has made pretty clear what's behind that thinking.
All right, Caitlin Collins, appreciate it. Let's get perspective now on the political, historical, and legal aspects of all this. Joining us for that, CNN political analyst, investigative reporter, and best-selling author Carl Bernstein, also CNN legal analyst Carrie Cordero. Carl, the lawsuit by the former president, frankly, the lies that the former president continues to spread about the election and the insurrection. What do you make of this lawsuit?
That it's part of a massive cover-up to keep us from knowing what a criminal president of the United States tried to do to subvert the American electoral system. We have not had such an act by an incumbent president of the United States in our history. We have never had a political party, such as today's Republican Party, that has supported this kind of president in this cover-up. And this is really a conspiracy between Donald Trump and his presidency and today's Republican Party to keep us from knowing what the insurrection of January 6th was all about, how the Republicans and Donald Trump tried to subvert the election and continue to try to subvert the electoral process. You have to go back to 1860 to 65, to the Civil War, in which a political party, a major political party, has engaged in such an attempt to undermine the most basic element of our democracy. And that's where we are today with Trump and his Republican allies.
Carrie, I mean, you've read through the lawsuit. Does the former president have much of a case?
I think it's a very weak case. I think that he does not have the ability to prevent a separate branch of government from doing its job. And so while Carl gives the historical reference, what this case really is going to be about is about the future. It's going to be about whether in the future Congress has a role. Congress can do its job, whether it can conduct investigations. And the January 6th investigation is a real investigation. It's credible. It's based on an attack on the Capitol to prevent the constitutional transfer of power. And so the former president's assertion that he doesn't have to have records provided to the committee, I don't think is going to be persuasive. And I certainly don't think that individuals who happened to give him advice in the past, particularly those who were not government officials, are going to have any credibility in terms of not complying.
Carrie, just in terms of the timing of all this, I mean, how long does this potentially hold things up for?
Well, and so that's probably the strategy here, Anderson, is to delay this as long as possible. And that's really going to be up to the courts. It's very difficult to predict whether a court is going to summarily just dismiss these claims, find them meritless. You know, for example, the president argues that there's no legislative purpose to the Congress's investigation, but actually there is. There are bills that are being considered now, including one that's called the Protecting Our Democracy Act, that even includes provisions about strengthening Congress's ability to enforce its subpoenas. So there are things that Congress is considering legislatively to rein in a future executive that abuses that office. And so it really will be on the courts to dismiss this case based on lack of merit.
Carl, I mean, do you see this stall tactic by the former president as being successful? Midterms are, just more than a year away.
It certainly could be successful if the Republicans win the House of Representatives and decide to shut down this investigation. But again, if you look at the abuse of power that goes back to the Watergate example and Nixon and the Senate Watergate Committee investigation, there was no privilege that extended to the president's attempts to act illegally. There is no such privilege to cover up illegal acts. And so we need to find out the substance of what indeed this president was saying and doing. And that's what the Congress of the United States, legitimately exercising its function, is trying to do here. And what we have is one of the two political parties trying to shut down an investigation into the most grievous, offensive undermining of our democracy in that insurrection, encouraged and ignited by the President of the United States and his party, now trying to make sure that we never know what happened in this unprecedented act. You have to go back 100 years to the Civil War to find an American political party that has thrown in its lot with this kind of abuse of power.
तू भी हाँ मेरे पीछे ऊपर से लिप्स तेरी मुझको तेरी ओर खींचे ब्लैक ब्लैक ट्रस्ट तेरी ब्लैक ब्लैक आईज है खुद पे मैं करता नाज वाह क्या चॉइस है सिल्की सिल्की हाँ बातें अलग खाता है खूब मजे करे बच्चे करे साथ में मेरी बड़ी हवेली रहे साथ में तू कहेगी मानूंगा तेरी बात में डोंट वरी बेबी अपनी अलग खाता है खूब मजे करे बच्चे करे साथ में मेरी बड़ी हवेली रहे साथ में तू कहेगी मानूंगा तेरी बात में तेरे सिल्की सिल्की हाँ बातें कर दिल की हाँ बाल तेरे सिल्की सिल्की हाँ बातें कर दिल की हाँ इतनी सोहनी हंसी है तेरी आय हाय इतनी सोहनी हंसी है तेरी करे मुझे किल में हाँ बाल तेरे सिल्की